Lockdown's legacy. It's been 5 years since the first COVID lockdown. All weekend on 5 Live, we are looking at the legacy of that extraordinary time.
So on Monday, we talked about the impact of the lockdown on children. Yesterday, we looked at how the pandemic changed the world of work.
Today we're talking about the NHS and long COVID. You might remember last year, 5 Live listener Simon Duckworth got in touch to share his experience of living with long COVID, and he sent us an update on how he's doing.
I'm sorry to say nothing's really changed for me. So start of May, I'm going to be 4 years into having long COVID. And it was last year, I got discharged from the long COVID clinic. So I'm still ill. The way they put it to me was that I'd exhausted everything that they had to offer. I'm back to GP care, but they think the clinic will be the best place for me, and they don't really know that much about long COVID. I'm just trying to make the best of things.
Well, one of the challenges the NHS faces from the pandemic is this ongoing issue of dealing with long COVID. And we're going to talk to a couple of other people affected by this. Oonagh Cousins is a rower and actually missed out on a place in the GB team at the Tokyo Olympics after contracting long COVID. And we're also speaking to Dr. Binita Kane, who's a consultant respiratory physician specialising in the condition. Her daughter also had long COVID. Morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Oonagh, your story is heartbreaking, really, but there will be many others who, like Simon, we were hearing from here, that have found themselves with this life-changing condition. But just tell us how COVID affected you and what happened, really, the whole kind of process and the whole sort of, course of events.
Yeah, thank you. I was part of the GB rowing team before the pandemic. I was training 16 times a week. I'd been pre-selected for Tokyo in the women's 8. And at literally kind of 2 days before lockdown was announced, I thought I'd come down with a mild cold. Turns out it was COVID, and I needed to take a few days off training, and I said I'd be back in a few days, and I basically just never got better. It ended up in developing into quite serious long COVID, and I was just kind of completely debilitated, unable to train, but also unable to kind of engage with daily life in general. And it's taken 5 years now, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster. I did have a major relapse at the end of 2022 as well, but I'm doing better now. But I still can't exercise. I still can't work full time. I'm still very much managing my symptoms on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, you did hope, didn't you, when the Olympics was postponed, that you might have an opportunity to get back there, but that never happened. What was that like for you? It must have been absolutely devastating.
Yeah, it was devastating. So I spent 2.5 years trying to get back to rowing, and I was really lucky in many ways because I had private health care. I had people who understood me, and I did seem to be making a gradual recovery. And I actually returned to training for a year, but then once I was rejoining the GB rowing team, and the training stepped up, and then I ended up having a massive relapse and kind of going back to square one. And at that point, I decided to retire from professional sport, and it was totally devastating. I couldn't believe that it all had ended. I was just starting my rowing career. I was new on the team. The Olympics was my dream. It was devastating.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I think also it's kind of worth highlighting the fact that you were obviously extremely fit. You were obviously a very, very healthy person before this horrible condition took hold.
Yeah, I think that's really important to say. Like, there's a lot of misconceptions out there that it kind of only affects vulnerable or elderly people. And yeah, I was I was very healthy. I was very fit. And I'm still not better. I don't think without medical treatment, unless they do more biomedical research and find treatment, I don't think I'll ever recover. So yeah, it can really affect anyone, and it's very debilitating.
Binita, I guess Oonagh's story, while sort of exceptional in terms of her athletic achievements, is also very familiar to you, is it?
Yes, absolutely. And Oonagh, her voice speaks for the nearly 2 million people in the UK who are still affected by COVID and the impact of the virus on their health. Many years later, we're half a decade now post the start of the pandemic, and some people have been ill for that entire period, including some children who have lost perhaps half their childhood at this stage. It's really, really difficult for people.
Tell us about your daughter's experience.
So my daughter was 10 at the time she was unwell. So I was a respiratory consultant working on the front line of the pandemic. And she had a very mild initial illness. She was a perfectly fit and healthy child beforehand, and she just never really recovered. So that first 12 months was life-changing for us as a family, because she went from being a completely healthy, active, happy child to being entirely housebound for the best part of a year. She needed a wheelchair for mobilizing any sort of distance, and she missed out on nearly 2 years of education when you put the lockdowns into the mix as well. My husband had to fold his business because one of us had to be at home all the time. So, we were impacted financially. Obviously, we're really lucky we could survive on one salary, but there are many families out there who are in that same situation, who face this triple whammy of they can't get help from the NHS, they are having to give up work, or what if it's a child, a parent is having to give up work, and then like Oonagh, they're having to seek private care and pay for medication because they can't get what they need through the NHS. So it's a triple whammy for many, many people.
How is she now?
Well, I ended up actually taking her abroad once I realised that, I mean, everyone in the NHS, please don't get me wrong, everyone was really helpful and did the absolute best they could, but people just didn't have the answers then. And we're talking 2022, so it wasn't too early in the pandemic, but I took her to Germany, and we were able to access a doctor out there who was really pioneering an approach of looking at things under the microscope, really trying to work out what's going on in that individual, and then repurposing drugs to treat what's going on at that micromolecular level. And it's important to understand we've now got over 440,000 research papers that tell us what COVID-19 is doing to the body. There's absolutely mountains of research out there, but that just isn't translating into treatments that people can access. So my daughter was lucky that she was able to access someone who could help her, and she slowly got better, probably over the course of the next 2 years, but she now, at the age of 14, lives a pretty normal life. She still, like Oonagh, can't do any extreme athletics or anything like that, but she is able to go to school and function.
I mean, that's really good to hear. But as you say, that opportunity limited to so many people, and there seems to be still such a massive gap in research and treatment and for this condition, which affects people in very, very, very different ways. That's the other challenge here. Oonagh, just finally to you, how do you manage with the mental sort of struggle of accepting the condition you have now and what that means for your future?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really tough. I think the last 5 years, I really was like, there's been multiple years where I was unable to kind of do daily tasks, like cook myself 3 meals a day, like get out of bed and kind of, because that experience was so traumatic, I feel very grateful for what I do have. But it's also, yeah, I can't really quite believe it, to be honest. Like I'm going to turn 30 at the end of May, and like half of my 20s I've spent being sick, and I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever get my health back. And to be honest, you're kind of emotionally coping with it every day and just trying to take a day as it comes, take every day as it comes, because it's so uncertain. It's so uncertain. You kind of hope that you're going to get better. You hope the doctors are going to be able to help you, but you don't know.
Well, I think many people would applaud both of your resilience in all of this, and thank you very much for sharing your own stories.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oonagh Cousins, so a former GB rower, and Dr. Binita Kane talking about her daughter and her experience with long COVID as part of our Lockdown Legacy series here on 5 Live Breakfast. It's 7:53.